So it's great to be here on this episode of the podcast with Darren O'Dea, currently Celtic under-18 coach. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Very well. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
And you'll be back training and playing now, are you?
Yeah, we're back full swing and games coming thick and fast, which is fantastic for the kids. They've obviously missed out on a lot of football. So I've been back on the pitch training and playing, and a little bit of normality coming back to life, and hopefully this is the end of it now coming. So no, the players are delighted, which is great.
Yeah. How did they cope during the lockdown? Did you sense that they really missed kind of getting out and playing?
Yeah, it sounds strange. I'm a big believer in you can always try to find a positive out of something. That was a message that I had sent to them. Was I talk about habits every day of creating elite habits and professional habits where usually our eyes are on them all the time, and we manage them habits and try to coax them into it, where essentially in lockdown they were on their own. We supported them from a distance, of course. We'd loads of Zoom calls and through WhatsApp and phone calls, and obviously home programs, X, Y, and Z. But really, they were in complete ownership of everything they did. So, funnily enough, coming off the back of lockdown, the development in some of them is huge. Yeah. A lot of them actually, obviously, physically developed naturally in terms of growth. But then, all you could do was run, I suppose. So, players that we'd maybe talk to about improving endurance and different things, they had the choice and they had the time to go and do it. And listen, we all know what it's like when you get up out of bed in the morning, when you've got a coach kind of pushing you and cajoling you. You work hard. Where when you've the option to stay in bed, it's your own decision eventually. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in the players taking ownership themselves. And they really impressed me. I have to say, listen, none of us wanted it, but you make a positive out of a negative. So the players came back in really good condition, and kind of you've seen a maturity nearly with it.
Great, because you're right. It would have been really kind of self-driven, all that learning there, because it would have been so easy for them to just drift off the path, isn't it? Because no one's watching, as you said.
And it was never ending. So we didn't have a date to say. So when you're going in for pre-season, for instance, we've all done it 6 weeks off for the first, certainly when I was younger, the first 3 weeks you were probably up to what you wanted to do. And then 3 weeks you'd batter it, nearly cram all your training in, where they didn't have an end goal. So that kind of motivation to get up every day and run and eat right and even sleep right, not staying up too late and staying in a professional habit and routine. But they really, really impressed me. And I think it's been really beneficial to them now because, as I said, it's ultimately taking ownership of your own career.
Brilliant. So when you look back, Darren, growing up in Dublin, who really influenced you as a young footballer?
Well, naturally, obviously, my parents was a big influence. My dad, in particular, my dad. Funny enough, when I go on into the next part of it, my dad is nearly the polar opposite to me. He's call him devil's advocate. Everything's balanced. He's not emotional in the slightest. If you ever went with a really strong argument and you thought there was no argument against, he would find the argument against. He's always very, very level-headed, where I would be more up and down. I'd be more emotional. But he was a massive influence, not just in terms of obviously support to me, but drove me everywhere and was with me in everything I did. And he was because of his personality, he wasn't pushy in any way. So I found kind of my own commitment to it. I was never pushed into anything. But funnily enough, some of the influences I had were not people. I had no brothers or sisters.
Okay.
So I lived in a street, so there was no grass. So we played football on the street all the time, a group of pals. But my neighborhood, it was like a generation thing that the older kids kind of pushed around the younger kids. Then it just kept it like flowed, if you like. So I always remember when I was younger, the older kids would come after us a little bit, but the ones that had bigger brothers usually got away with a bit because their brothers would stick up. I never had someone to back me up. So this is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, but I was always, I kind of molded myself into someone that just knew I had to fight for myself. So I spent the majority of my younger life in fights and scrapes. It was one thing I never did was walked away from anything and that's a negative thing, but it kind of molded me when I went into football. I was known as being a competitor. I wouldn't back down from something. Sometimes I'd overstep the mark, probably more often than not in my younger years. But there was a certain strength to that, and there were certain bits of that really did help me. As I got older, of course, I needed then to tailor it back a little bit and find the good bits and take away the bad bits. But I would say a lot of the influence I had was I was on my own a lot of the time. So we played against different estates. I very, very remember getting in scrapes all the time. I had no one else to back me up. You're on your own.
Do you think that, and you said it really, were you aware, you know, as you got a little bit older, that background, being an only child and actually having it kind of stick up for yourself, were you aware that had almost influenced your mindset, or was it just unconscious?
I became really aware. I'm sure we'll come to it later, much later in my career, probably in my mid-20s. But no, right when I came over and went into professional football as a young kid, I was me fire with fire. If someone stepped to me, and I don't mean physically all the time, in anything, I would have to meet without any thought, meet it. And there was a lot of goodness that came from that in terms of even simple things like pre-season, for instance. I knew I wouldn't be the fittest, but I probably knew I'd outrun people just purely because I would happily go to places people wasn't willing to go to. Football in simple things like being, let's say, a left back and I was playing against a right winger, he might think he had the beating of me or was quicker than me. I would never back down from it. I would never try to find any other way than going toe to toe with him, if you like. Now, sometimes that would kill me a little bit, because if someone's much better you one way, you have to try find another. I wouldn't find the other way. I would just keep going and go after someone. And sometimes you'd wear people down that way. So I was very much like that, and I probably didn't change till I got later into my career, and I would cause issues sometimes because of that. Now, I would like to think all the managers and coaches that were with me knew that was my strength, and I overstepped the mark at times with different things. And my teammates, I got on great with all my teammates, but when I trained, when I played, I was always a very, very fierce competitor, to put it that way.
Oh yeah, I know we tend to look back when we're kids with the rose-tinted glasses about street football, but do you think that influence of street football's missing now? Can you notice it being a coach?
Yeah. I definitely. I think, and I'm probably, as much as I'm not that old, my type is less and less now. You don't really see, which is not really saying is a bad thing, because, as I said, I had loads of there was deficiencies I had that other players don't have. But I do think the upbringing I had in terms of football, out with football as well, was great, but certainly within football was brilliant. Like I probably played the majority of my football in my street, and the goal was we had ramps in the street that got built to the pole, so a ball would be, one of my mates would be clipping in a ball, and I'm trying to practice volleys but hitting the pole, but see, getting the ding off the pole, it was brilliant, and the feeling, and I practice headers. And when I say practice, I don't like using that word, because I wasn't practicing, I was doing what I wanted to do.
It's like playing, wasn't it?
You were just out kicking a ball. And then the other thing I loved was, going back to it, was estates. The other estates played each other, and I remember you'd play against each other, and you'd be a fair bit of needle in it. But like, if I was walking down the street the following day and the group of boys were coming and I was on my own, you'd be jumping into a garden to hide. Like, there was always that would be with a rivalry, if you like. I suppose that environment I was in all the time was good. And I had a strange upbringing in terms of where I was from. I played a lot of football, but I played for a club that was across the other side of the city, so I had different groups of people. So I think that benefited me a lot, being with different people from different walks of life and different backgrounds, and so I had a real kind of mixed upbringing when it came to football.
Did you do any other sports apart from football, Darren?
Everything. I was the guy that, listen, I think you see certainly at younger ages that someone that's good at all sport, if you like. I did every sport, but purely to get out of school. If I remember playing tennis, they said, anyone want to do tennis, anyone want to try out. Now, I was pretty decent at tennis, I still enjoy playing it, so I put my hand up. But then I realised it was after school, So I wasn't missing any school. I played a couple of games and was realising I was out till 7 coming back. I was like, this is nonsense. But I played Olympic handball. We won the championships in my school, in primary school, Olympic handball. I loved Olympic handball. Gaelic, obviously in Ireland, Gaelic was huge. I was very, very good at Gaelic. Hurling, got involved in hurling. Tennis, then any athletics I did. Any sport that I could literally do, I'd have done it. If the school offered it, I was doing it.
I know it, it doesn't seem to be as much nowadays, that multi-sport, or people encouraging them, especially at, a young age. I think it's phenomenally important. Do you think it's quite important, or not essential, because these sports teach you other things as well, like you were speaking about the Gaelic football and the tennis, your hand eye and your coordination and your movement, it's all transferable really, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think there's a part of it though as well is the personality that of just playing different sports. I wasn't the best obviously at every, so I usually was probably one of the better ones at football, but then I went and played hurling and I was a weak player in the team. So then again, did I chuck it because I wasn't the best player? Or do you just, usually I would never have chucked it because I enjoyed getting out of school, but I improved. Then I learned that I improved the hurling and I became a decent hurler for a while. Gaelic was obviously similar to football, but Olympic handball, I found that I loved it, but you're always active. So you were a kid, so you stayed as a kid. Nowadays you see kids at a young age, and I don't want to kind of belittle it, but they're doing individual sessions and training, and where I was just a kid playing as much sport as possible because I wanted out of school, but I loved sport. That was my thing. I loved playing sport. Now, of course, my main focus was football because that was the sport I enjoyed the most, but I never considered myself a footballer. I was just played football, and I considered myself an Olympic handballer, a Gaelic player. I was just a kid playing loads and loads of sport. So I think now I look at kids now and it's like they get to 7, 8 years old and I'm a footballer. I'm going to develop every skill possible. And you're absolutely right. There's transferable skills from different sports. But I think just the personality, just being a kid and not really worrying too much, just run about and enjoy yourself was a big thing for me.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I was the same. I loved a lot of different sports and played them. And, we were speaking earlier, and when I'm listening to you speaking, nowadays we would call it, in fancy terms, when you were a kid, you were really learning a lot of that growth mindset, isn't it? Because you were having to learn. As a kid, you wouldn't think about it, would you? You would just, right, how do I get good at this? I want to get better at that. And if you're not good, you're learning to overcome adversity, isn't it? So how important do you think it is at early years to have that kind of opportunity to, not be the best and keep on working? Do you think that's quite important for a young player?
It's something that's huge. And I think we've all seen it. I saw it certainly when I was a player in academies. The best player at youth team level usually doesn't actually progress into a top level first team player. There's probably a multitude of reasons for that. But one of the things I see now with my own eyes is they lack a little bit of humility, but they are still young kids. So if you're the quickest and you're quicker than everyone, you must think you're doing everything right. Where you don't quite grasp that there's still layers and layers and layers above you. So I did a little kind of presentation for the players. It was part of a presentation, but talked about Messi, who's quite clearly the easiest person for them to relate to because he's the best player maybe ever. But Messi, I think I've got the presentation, but I'm sure he'd won something like 4 Ballon d'Ors. I think he'd won 5 La Ligas, Copa del Rey's, and he was considered maybe the best ever, but certainly the best of his generation. He changed his diet. And I even thought, even though I was the one that was trying to find the principle of what I was talking about, I found that fascinating. Even if Messi was eating McDonald's every day of the week, surely he would think, I'm doing everything right. So I'm the best player ever. So eating McDonald's must be all right for me. But no, he's actually striving to find bits of improvement all the time. So I use that as I think it's a real powerful one. And there was the golfer Padraig Harrington. Where Padraig Harrington was the first Irish player, I think, in over 100 years to win 2 majors back to back. Set all sorts of records. So again, he was at the top of his game. He went to world number 1, and he changed his swing. And I thought, Padraig Harrington never recovered from that. But the mindset, that is an elite mindset, that you're at the top and you're looking to improve. So surely if we're not at the top, we're always looking to improve. I think it's easier when you show the elite ones that are actually at the top of their game. They're still always looking to improve, but that's why they're at the top of their game.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's why they're there. So younger kids, I get it. I actually understand. If you're quicker than everyone, why would you think I need to be quicker? You're technically the best. Why do you need to be technically better? But it's understand that if that's your mindset, you will eventually hit a ceiling. And that ceiling might, and I actually say to the players sometimes, you might get to first team level. You might actually earn great money out of football. You'll never reach your potential. Because your potential can be anything if you always want to improve. And that's kind of the message.
Yeah, I think that's just a great point, Darren. Like you were saying there, in golf in particular, I know Tiger Woods did that, and he did it successfully, didn't it? At the very top, changed his swing, had the humility to deal with when his form dipped in the back of it. Then he came back and went on that run for how many majors. So it's incredible to be able to do that. As a young player, a young athlete, in order to do that, I think, and it's probably really important to have good people around you, isn't it, that are pointing,
Absolutely.
sometimes not in a hard way, but, are parents or coaches that are pointing it out to you. There's more there, isn't it?
Well, I played, fortunate enough in my career to play at a very high level, and then, with all due respect to Dundee, later in my career, at just a level below. But the mindsets with the different type of players was huge. That's what I noticed massively. And by the way, I was guilty of this at times, but how many times you heard players say, a manager comes in and tries to change the schedule or tries to change the way you train or nutrition, and they go, but we've always done this. We've always done this. But I'm saying, but we're at Dundee, so there's levels miles above us. So why would we not want to change and try to find a better way? Where I think players and people in general, I think, enjoy kind of familiarity. The change is when you change, you're a little bit uncomfortable at times. And by the way, I've been guilty of this 100%. When I was a player, I'd be thinking, where now I think the older I got, and certainly going into coaching, my eyes or my kind of mind decided, I'm going to take in everything I possibly can. And listen, if I don't like it, that's fine, but I'll decide where I'll shut off from nothing. And that definitely is something I do now, but it started probably when I got to, as I said, mid-20s, once I start going abroad. But yeah, it's so important you do have the right influences around you. And I was probably lucky that I have a very small, kind of close circle around me. My wife, obviously, been a massive support. I've been with her since I was a teenager. My wife is probably the hardest person with me because she doesn't allow me. She's kind of very, very good with me in terms of, she's obviously very sympathetic to me and we have a great relationship, but she's also the one that will kind of go snap out of it. And that is my personality, that I'm, as I said at the very start, always try to find the positive out of anything. So if there's ever a time where I'm feeling just a wee bit disillusioned with something, usually she's the one that goes, right, up you get and on you go. And I'm a big believer in that you just always have to keep kind of moving forward no matter what's going on. So absolutely, your circle around you is pivotal to what you're doing.
Great. When you were playing in Dublin then, and as a kid growing up, when did you, as you said, you would say to yourself, right, I'm a footballer, I'm a handball player, I'm a tennis player. When did you kind of say, right, I'm going to be a footballer?
Truthfully, very, very late on, in probably at about 14. So I played, there was under 13 was when trials started to happen and different things. But I was quite good academically, and my mum and dad made it very, very clear I wasn't leaving school until I got qualifications, and then I could pursue football. But like, I remember 13 years old, and this conversation stands out, saying to my friend's mum, she was saying, "Oh, what you want to do?" And I was saying, "Well, I'd like to be a footballer, but I know chances are that won't happen. So I want to do this." And there was a local club, and they had a beautiful pitch that I used to walk by, but you couldn't get into because it was gates and all. They were just a local kind of the equivalent of a junior club. And I used to always say that's where I wanted to play. I'd get a job and then I'd play there. And when I went on trial, even when I was on trial, my head would have been, this is great, but I probably won't make it as a footballer. So I think football eventually found me, if you like that. I suppose when contract offers started happening, even when first contract came in from David Moyes was at Preston, went over to Preston, they offered me a contract. I was pretty sure that wasn't going to be for me. And Celtic happened, Man United. It was loads and loads of clubs, but probably then when the contract started to come, it was like, right, we really need to consider this now. And we sat down, myself, my mum and dad, obviously, again, as I said, I have no brothers or sisters, and wrote pros and cons and could I stay in school, should I go? And we came to the conclusion, and I came to the conclusion, I wasn't kind of starry-eyed, like I have to go. But yeah, probably not. The kind of decision of being a footballer was made when I signed a professional contract. So then you're now a footballer, and you need to dedicate your whole life to it. Up until that point, don't get me wrong, I worked extremely hard, but I lived a normal life. I played with my mates in the street. Like, I had a game on a Sunday morning, and I'd be out till 10:30 at night on the street playing, sweating buckets, and into the house. And my dad would be saying, "You have a game in the morning." It was impossible to keep you off the street. Do you know what I mean? And there was a certain strength to that as well. The other thing was, I remember when I got 14, there was an underage disco, for instance, and it was on every Friday night, and we were playing on a Saturday morning. Said to my dad, I was like, "Come on, can I go?" My mum, they were like, "We've got football on in the morning." I was like, "I know." So I didn't go. The following month it was on again. I said, my mates had all come back and said, "It's amazing, it was brilliant," and all this. So I said to them, "Can I go?" And they were like, "You've got football in the morning." I said, "Well, I really want to go." And they said, "On you go." So I went. And the next day I played. Now, there was no kind of alcohol or anything like that. I was home probably for midnight, I think. I was rubbish the next day. And my dad tells me the story now. We're in the car, way home, it was silence in the car. I just said, "I'm never going to that again. I'll never go out late again." And he didn't really care less, because he wasn't, but it was great because I was learning it myself. I was learning myself that staying up late at night probably, now, was that the reason I didn't play well? Who knows? Who knows? I started to learn self-discipline myself. I changed my own diet when I got kind of 14, 15 as well. In school, I'd be at the shop, and I'd usually be eating crisps and whatever it may be, kind of sausage rolls, where now I changed to eating baguette with a bit of chicken in it, and maybe a chocolate muffin rather than a pack of crisps. So it wasn't exactly eating the best nutritional diet, but I learned it. I did it myself. So then it stuck. It stuck, where I'm a big believer with the players now. We flood them, and you have to do this, you have to do that. And eventually they drift away from it because they don't really want to do it. They're doing it because they're told to do it. That mentality. And I grew out of that mentality very, very early. And I think that stood me in really good stead.
Yeah, when I'm listening to you speaking, Darren, even about your choice about, going into a professional club, you it must have been great, and you've done it because you've always had choices, isn't it? You've done things because you thought, well, that's what I want to do. But it wasn't all, because some people will say, oh, you should only have one option, isn't it? And it should be this burning desire and drive you. And of course, that's great. But the downside of that, if it doesn't happen, you see people totally distraught. And you followed your path, but you had your education, you had different things to do. That must have felt good for you.
Yeah. So you've been around sport for so long, an elite level sport. To actually get to the top of football, for instance, the amount of work and dedication is extraordinary. It's extraordinary that at 16 years old, you have to absolutely sacrifice everything around you. And that is the fact of the matter when you get to that age. So if you're going to do it, you're going to have to want to do it. Not because you're told to do it. So when they come in with my squad now, they come into first year, they're coming out of school environment and into first year. The first kind of while I've noticed it takes them a while to adjust with me, because I'll actually openly say, see, if you want to cut corners, I'm not the school teacher that comes down you a ton of bricks. No problem. Cut corners. Don't worry. If you really don't want to do something, don't do it. But I'm going to be here to support you, because I'm assuming you want to do this because you want to be a professional footballer. But there's no way you can hold someone's hand through this. And especially in the environment football's in, it's relentless. It's very, very tough. It's demanding. And then I look at 16 years old, you should be allowed to socialize more than they are, but you can't. You need to live a certain life that befits being a professional footballer, which is that extreme. You're damn right, it's extreme. but they're going to have to want to do it. So my dad didn't give me leeway because he thought it would be good. It was just the way he parented, if you like. But it was so beneficial to me because everything I did, and if anyone that knows me would tell you, I'm as stubborn as anything. I won't do something I don't want to do. So I was the last guy you'd be telling to do something. But the fact that I figured out myself, I want to do this. And simple things I'm saying about diet and socializing, I did it myself. So eventually it maintained over a 10, 15-year period. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Brilliant. And see, at that point when, at 14, 15 in Dublin, was that the point there where football in Ireland would have been really, I know it was, traditionally really kind of popular, but was it really vibrant in Ireland at that point? Was that?
Yeah, I grew up obviously in the 90s. Man United were winning everything, and they were kind of, along with Celtic, my team. But Celtic, I couldn't watch Celtic. I didn't have Sky, and I would I travelled over to Old Trafford a couple of times, and I think I had an uncle in London, so I went to QPR and Wimbledon used to share. It was Sellers Park or Loftus Road, one or the other. They shared the stadium, so I went to both, but it was when Man United played. My uncle, I think one of my uncles in Dublin had Sky, so I used to go around and was able to watch either a Celtic Rangers game or I remember it was Man United and Newcastle at the time going for the league title. So but football was huge. Man United, Liverpool probably were the other team that everyone supported. And then obviously Celtic, and Ireland didn't have many Rangers fans, that was for sure. But football was huge, Yeah,
brilliant. And what was it like leaving home for the first time then, Darren?
Really exciting. So I thought it was brilliant, and that independence of going away. And I moved over with 4 other Irish players, and we all moved into digs together, and the excitement of going, and you're picturing like tears at the airport and going, it was quite the opposite. We couldn't wait to get on the plane. And I tell you what, after saying 3 months, it hits you like a ton of bricks. You realise, right, this is my life. Getting up in the morning, go training, double session, home, eat dinner, rest, go to bed. And then you'd phone calls back home, and this extra social things your friends were doing, and you actually pined for it. I remember thinking, I'd just love to be back home now. And you were desperate to get home any chance you got, and stray out with your mates and wherever they were doing. And you were desperate to do it because you missed it. But again, it goes back to the ones that realise that I'll give that up because I want to be a footballer. You do have to give it up. But if you don't want to do it, then you're never going to do it, and you'll eventually stray away. So the first 6 months to a year were very, very difficult and exciting at the same time. Real highs and lows. You'd win a game, it was amazing, and you were playing well, and you were getting promoted up. I travelled pretty quickly in my first year, and everything was just new, and it was brilliant. But then see, when you had a lull, like even just a defeat, or you got left out, you'd no one around you. You were on your own. You're in a digs. Very, very difficult. And again, I know players will always do it, and again, they probably have to, but to take out of your home environment at that age is very, very risky.
And what helped you get through? Because it sounded like, you were looking forward to getting away, excitement, making your own way. And when you, after that kind of, bricks moment, when you realise you're away from home and you're on your own. I wonder, did your relationship, 2 questions. What got you through that? Was it just your, determination? And the second question is, did your relationship to football change when it was day in, day out, at a professional club?
Yeah, so the first question of kind of what got me through it was good people. My digs lady, and I have to say the husband, who I'm still regularly in touch with, weren't digs lady. She was like a foreign mum to me. She absolutely properly looked after us. So that helped. Tommy Burns was the biggest influence of it all. Tommy would, if he knew you were kind of, and the digs lady certainly would have been part of it, she'd maybe ring Tommy and say, look, I can tell he's struggling. And it might have been to do when you were injured or something. Like injured was really difficult because you literally had nothing then. And an injury was probably unique at that age. But Tommy would be out to the digs. And I look back and think, Tommy was overlooking a whole academy. So maybe 60 kids in it, and he's got his own kids and his wife and everything. Yeah, he'd literally come out to the digs, and he wouldn't come out and tell you why he was there. He would just be present, and he'd he'd have a little word with you, kind of, and genuinely, it might only be for a couple of minutes off the side or something, and you're just coming out for a bit of fun and just to be around you, but it would lift you instantly. So he was huge. My parents obviously would kind of fly over at the drop of a hat if needs be as well. The second thing, the influence with football, 100%. I quickly realised this isn't that fun.
Yeah.
It isn't. Been a footballer every day, training 2-3 times a day, the work. Listen, I loved being a footballer and I love training. I love football, but it's not enjoyable. You can't enjoy every moment of being a professional footballer. It's impossible. And if you are, fair dues to you, but I didn't, because it's really tough work. So a lot of it, the good moments you have are worth it, are worth all them tough moments you have. But at the time, that's very hard to convince yourself, and especially when you're 16 years old. So my relationship changed. That I realised this is now a profession. This is what I'm dedicating myself to. So I kind of, as I said, accelerated really quickly and then hit a lull, and I realised I was just going through the motions. Trained well, don't get me wrong, but trained, was doing no more than what I had to. And then all of a sudden it hits you. By the way, I'm going to be back home in a year's time if I don't jump to the next level. So I kind of had moments, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Your relationship changed massively.
Because I think those are huge moments for young players and people in different sports as well. When the fan, you're doing it for fun, and then it becomes a profession, as you say, 3 times hard work, and how you get over that point's a key one, isn't it?
Well, that was for me. I accelerated really quickly, so everything was going right, and then I was probably then stayed where I was meant to be at for 6 months, 8 months. And I remember thinking, I knew I was working hard. It wasn't that I wasn't doing the right things, but it was like, no, you need to go and find something else to do. You need to find the next step. And okay, I did have great support around me, but ultimately it had to came from me. And it goes to show you the small snippets. I remember Tommy Burns saying to me when Gordon Strachan came in, he loves fit players. He's just absolutely anal on being fit. And I think it was around that time Paul Le Guen came in at Rangers, and there was this new kind of noise around Rangers coming in at Celtic that he was massive on fitness and all this different things. So that fed into Celtic, and so Gordon was kind of then big. So I went away in the off season and literally just ran. There was no method to it. It was run till I felt physically sick. And I came back that pre-season and was just flying. And it gave me opportunity. It didn't make me a career, but it gave me opportunity. It kept me involved with the first team longer. But it was striving to find, I need to do something. So I think footballers now, they think that there's this kind of map or this menu we've got. When you tick these things, you'll become a first team player. It actually doesn't work like that. I don't ever say it's luck, because I'm massive on, I have a big bugbear mind that it's not luck. I didn't work my whole life to become a footballer for luck. But you have to be ready at every moment, put it that way. And you need opportunity, of course, as well. But this kind of menu that you think, right, if I train this amount of time and I'll become a first team player, it actually doesn't work like this. You have to actually constantly be finding more, and you have to be ready at all times. So I had that moment probably after, I think, 2 years. First year was great. Second year was going through the motions. Third year I went again and then broke through.
And I think you're right, and I would agree with you. That's that thing about, being ready to take the opportunity. And when I'm listening to your story, you can see how you're growing up, and that, what you could say, that internal drive, but that internal belief that you developed, that, and you wouldn't think about it at the time, but you did it, isn't it? That I can affect the world if I work harder. If I do this, if I work on my weaknesses, I'll get better. I'm going to be ready, isn't it?
My thing was always based around fitness, sort of. So I always had the mindset of, if I'm fitter than someone, and then again relating back to my own personality, was they won't be able to stop me coming after them. I might get beaten. So I was a real defender's mindset of stopping people. I was never really thinking of anything other than stopping people. So it was a mindset: if I'm fitter than you, no matter how many times you get the better, I won't have to stop coming after you, and I'll eventually get the better of you. And of course, tactical awareness and technique and also my own control got much better with experience. But my big thing was, 1v1. That was always my mindset. It was everything was 1v1. So when I played against a striker early on the game, I'm sussing it out, thinking, I'll wear you down. I'll wear you down. And my whole, the way I trained, everything was always designed to go 1v1 with someone. So that kind of helped me. That kind of mindset definitely helped me, because everything about me was confrontational.
Yeah.
So if you're going into a confrontation, you damn better be prepared.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll get, and relating back to my earlier, when you weren't prepared, you'd get punched and kicked about. If you picked a fight you weren't able to handle, you'd end up getting beaten up. So in football, in related to football, if I wasn't physically prepared to match a winger or centre forward, I'd get shown up. So that was always kind of my mindset.
Oh yeah, because what you're thinking quite strategic about your game and your career, aren't you? You're thinking everything's going to be on to funnel things into me winning a 1-1 over 90 minutes, isn't it? That's
I probably I think it was a good mindset, but it was also everything was fear driven with me.
Yeah.
So it was to not be beaten, to not be left behind, to not be kind of sent back home to Ireland, to get I never went into games thinking I'm going to be the best player today. I'm going to really show everyone my quality. My goal was to stop whoever was coming against me. So to a certain extent, I want players to have a broader mindset than that. And certainly defenders nowadays, you have to more experience. But I never visualized before a game how I was going to pass the ball. It was how I was going to stop someone. And even the visualization of the pain you'd have to go through, and fatiguing, but I would never ever stop. And then that would feed into how I trained. Alone in pre-season, everything was about not being shown up, basically, not letting people down. So I wouldn't say I would be kind of putting that on other young players. I'd want them to be more kind of brazen about it, want to be the best, but certainly it helped me out.
But what you're describing, Darren, and I'm not just saying that to you, is that mentality, which you described there, is to play at the high level that you've played at, you have to have that mentality to be able to deal with the pressure you're putting on yourself. You know, it's that away, what we would say away from motivation. I'm not going to get beat here, you know, because the majority of people over tense up when that's on them, or, you know, put too much pressure on themselves. There's a great example, and you'll appreciate this because you like tennis. I once heard Roger Federer say, I know if I go on a tennis court and play any of the top 20, or maybe it was top 10, he said, at any day, any of them can beat me if I'm not at my 100%. So I'm always looking to get fitter, get better, to prepare. And that's a high performance mindset, to be able to deal with that pressure, to know if I'm not there, I could get beat.
Yeah. But that's what got me up out of bed in the morning, was if I don't get up when I eventually go and have a game coming up, I'll not be ready. So I used to be quite tense before games, but relaxed in my mind. I was tense in terms of how I prepared, but I was relaxed in my mind that my big thing was, if I was prepared, I would accept the consequence of what was coming. And if I didn't prepare, I'd be ultra nervous. And that was very, very rare to not be prepared, because obviously if you want to play football, but also subconsciously, like I look back now, it's easy for me to say now, I would never have admitted this at the time, but to play at the level I did with the ability I did, I needed that. I needed to have a mindset that befitted that, because I was a decent player, but I wasn't at the level I see some of the Celtic and Rangers players and defenders, and I wasn't at that level, but I would have matched them in terms of kind of that drive to fight something out. And again, going back to my younger years, it was befitting of my personality.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. The other thing I loved what you said there, and I think it is really important, was, you know, the influence Tommy Burns had, and it was person to person, isn't it? He came and seen you, and it wasn't about how good you were on the ball or how aggressive you were. It was, you know, making that connection person to person, and I think that's huge, isn't it?
It's enormous. So I was talking to someone about this the other day, one of the other coaches, and Tommy, someone that is regularly the topic of conversation in many different groups. But he I'm a coach now, and I search all the time. You've got social media. I go and watch other clubs, other countries, everything. I'm in desperation to find new ideas and improve myself. And if you said who's one of the top coaches I worked under, I mean coach, not person, coach. Tommy was right up there. I can't remember one single session I ever did with Tommy.
Yeah.
I actually regret it, because obviously I was young, but I'd love to have a portfolio. If I was older in my career and I'd been taking everything down, and I can't remember a thing he did. But yeah, I'm saying he's the best coach. I remember how he made me feel. I remember a million conversations we had. So as much as I want to be immaculate in how I work, I want to be as detailed and as clear and as simple with the players, and the players to completely understand everything I do. But ultimately, when I understand the influences around me, it was how they made me feel. And the person-to-person relationship we had was actually how I perceived them to be top coaches. But they weren't that. I'm actually judging them as coaches. I'm judging how I felt and how they were as people to me. So it's funny that's something I really do keep with me with Tommy was, and I think a lot of players that worked with him would say the same. You go, he's a top coach. Oh, what was it he did? I don't know. He ended up talking about him as a person.
Yeah.
So that's huge to me now. Yeah.
And yeah, I just put up a quote yesterday by, Carl Jung, the psychologist, and it talks to that specifically. And I love Jung's work, and it says, learn all the techniques, learn all the strategies, but when you're with someone, it's soul to soul. And that's just what you said there about Tommy Burns, isn't it? It's when you know someone cares about you.
Yeah, but to give you an example of like a session now, I went to watch the session a couple of years ago, and I'm certainly not going to name the coach, but the session was immaculate. It was real detailed. It was all color coded, everything, and he explained what he was going to do, and I watched the session, and the players were they weren't engaged with it.
Yeah.
And he's asking me afterwards, going, "It's a good session, isn't it?" And obviously, I kind of
said,
"Yeah, it is." But in my head, I was thinking, "That's rubbish," because the players didn't engage in it. And I had to use then my own experience of it. I had a thing I wanted to work on with the players, and so I designed the session, which I regularly do, and put it together, and it looked perfect on paper. So went out and we did it with the players, and I was getting frustrated now, not to the players, but I was like, this isn't working. But I was convinced it was the players because they just weren't doing what I was wanting them to do, basically.
Yeah.
So I went away, rather than chuck it in the bin, went away, tinkered with a few things, and went back a few weeks later and did it again. I was convinced this is a good session.
Yeah.
And the players didn't have it again, so I just chucked it in the bin. But I still to this day think it's a brilliant session. But they don't seem to interact with it. They don't get it. It doesn't have any flow to it. They don't enjoy it. So to me, it's a waste of time. It doesn't matter then. The important thing is the interaction. I'm massive on players being engaged in any training, in anything they do. And ultimately, that's on them. They need to be engaged, need to be focused. I get all that. But as a coach, I have a duty to actually engage them. And if they don't engage, and I will tinker with things. Sometimes it makes it. Sometimes you need to step in and say, lads, tune in. But eventually, you need to come back to yourself and go, is it something then that I can't see? And with this, I genuinely still to this day, I can't see it. But I just got rid of it because I thought, if the players aren't enjoying, they're not doing it, well, then it's a waste of time. But in my head, the session looks great. Going back to Tommy and the quote you're talking about, it's huge. It's huge. My favorite part of a session is not the detail of it, is when I see the players completely engrossed in it, and I know it's a good training session.
And that, I think that's great. In fancy terms of psychology, you talk about, you'll have heard terms in the zone and flow. And that's what we're all trying to do, isn't it? Where someone's just lost in doing what, the drill or the session and play. And the simplest definition I can give of kind of being in the zone is like you described, when you're a kid, you're in it all the time when you're playing football or handball, isn't it? That's it. When you're waiting for your mom to shout you in for your tea, you're just engrossed in the game.
Engrossed in it. So I'm massive on the energy. I love real good energy. I love hearing the players moaning. That means they're engaged in what they're doing. They're contesting decisions. As long as they're not taking their complete attention away, but that means they're engrossed in what they're doing. And I always say to the coach, like, don't get me wrong, I strive to get the best possible session, but all I feel I'm never doing is just manipulating something. really what footballers want to do is run around and score goals and kick the ball. It's the same way as what a kid would, but we just put conditions around it that maybe manipulates one team out of the session. But if the energy isn't high and they're not engaged in it, for me, it's a waste of time. Now, of course, there's certain parts of sessions when you're maybe working tactically that you're walking through and that you understand maybe the players aren't as engaged, but as long as they're listening. Or set plays is a big thing. Doing set plays, I was big on who wants to do set plays. You get to the top level, but you understand how important it is, but you don't want to do them. So we try to sometimes mix it up in terms of how we do set plays to make it more engaging. So I'm a massive believer in energy. And players hear me say it all the time. The energy is key. But then that's down to me as a coach as well. I have to take responsibility.
Do you notice then, Darren, and you know, I'm a great advocate for young people nowadays, because I think some of the tools they learn in school, you know, to question and look at things, you know, differently are brilliant. Of course, they've got a downside because, you know, I don't think they give, I don't think they just take things as match now, they'll question. I think that is a good thing in a lot of ways. But when because you're not that long finished playing and you can remember well coming through the ranks, do you notice a difference between the young players now to when you were that age or not?
Yeah, no, there definitely is, and we need to be careful in this because this is a topic of conversation that comes up a lot, and it kind of comes from my generation certainly and before, of how you were spoken to, how you were dealt with. Child welfare and psychology and mental health is now become so paramount in academies and in life in general, which is 100% the right way to go. How you spoke to someone in an office years ago will be different to the way now. Human resources is a big part of every company, and you have to adhere to certain things, and that's a good thing. It does put the shackles on how you send the message over, but ultimately what we are trying to do is pretty much the same. It's just how you deliver the message is a hell of a lot more subtle probably than certainly my generation. So yeah, that in turn means kids, you can't just say jump, and usually it was how high. Now it's why. Why do I have to jump? But you have to be willing to say, well, this is why, and this is, and explain. And it goes back to my kind of original point. When they come in with me, I think I could pull my hair out every day if I was correcting people left, right, and centre all the time, because they're young kids and they're learning their way. But what I do is immediately say, this isn't my responsibility isn't to make you a footballer. Your responsibility is to make you a footballer. So you own it. So I allow the players, they design the rules and they've designed, when I say fine system, people associate that with money. It's not money. It's usually push-ups or something, but they design it, they own it. That's simple things, but the environment is theirs. So if they want to be a wrecker of the environment, it's on them. It's your environment. It's not mine. I'm not the school teacher that needs a perfect classroom, everyone fingers on the lips. And I want your own character to come in and find your own way, but this is yours. You own it as a group together. And I use U-team football is a little bit different because you are trying to create a team environment and good teammates, but at the end of the day, it's very individualized because ultimately you're all trying to strive to get to the next level, and then obviously in the first team. So I use the word vehicle. The team is the vehicle, and we need the vehicle to work. So we need it to be right, but ultimately then you get what you want out of it. You get your own individual rewards out of it. So players are different. There's no doubt about it. How we treat them is different, but that's a good thing because but then usually the guys that you hear, and I'm one of them, by the way, because I've been guilty of doing it before, I go, oh, that was great, wasn't it? The way I was absolutely treated like a mug. And I did, and it toughened me up and all that. And it was, and I appreciate that and I loved it. But it's always the guys that made a career that I was talking about, not the guy that maybe really, really struggled with that type of behaviour and that alpha male way, if you want to call it for a better phrase. I loved it. I got on great with it. I struggled at times, but it toughened me up. There was others that didn't. So I think that's thrown sometimes as a criticism, as kids aren't the same anymore. They're more protected, and rightly so, because they are kids, and that's a good thing. Mental health is a lot more prevalent than it was years ago. No one would have even thought of that when I was growing up. So that they're good things. How we get them, the same messages are the same. It's just how we get them across is different.
I think a big positive I notice about young players now, I'm blown away a lot. You know, in the end, they have to play well, but I'm certainly blown away by how articulate about the game
Yeah.
players are, Yang, and their actual knowledge of the tactical side of the game now is just phenomenal, I think.
I actually, believe it or not, people, I think, for instance, Monday Night Football down in England, Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville, I think has been a revelation in British football, because they break down the game and in real minute details, but it sounds quite simple and people understand it. I think if you went on Twitter or Instagram, there's guys out there analysing football all the time, and some of the content's brilliant, and I look through it all, it's brilliant. It goes back to our original point, though. There's a difference. I think there's a lot of good analysts out there. The difference is, can you coach it? Can you be the guy that puts that into practice? And that's what I'm striving for, and what everyone's striving for. And then on top of that is not just being able to coach it. Can you build relationships that the players want to do it? So they're the real kind of expertise that you need to learn. I believe I could sit in a room, no problem, with many people, and you'd all be fairly equal in terms of how you analyze football, how you break it down, how do you coach it, and how do you manage people is how you get to the top, and that's the top ones can do. So it's funny, I went for an interview before, and I was playing at the time, and it was at Celtic, and Brendan Rodgers was in there, and we had to do a presentation. I did a presentation, and I knew it was good. I knew it was detailed, and anyway, went on, and I obviously didn't get the job. It was when Damien Duff came in. But Brendan, I spoke to Brendan afterwards, and he was so genuine. He gave me so much of his time. It was incredible, really. But he said, the next time you come, show me your team doing that. Because what he was basically saying, he wasn't saying it now in a genuine way, but I look back and think he probably was saying, your eye is brilliant. You know what you're talking about, but come back to me when you can actually coach it and you put it into practice. And I think that's a big thing. So the content you can get nowadays, players are so much more educated in football. People are. I think fans are as well. I think fans can see pattern. They can see what's going on in a game. There's a big difference between coaching it and then ultimately managing players to do it.
Totally. It's a great point, isn't it? About, because sometimes you can't skip the experience bit about taking your ideas and actually seeing which ones work. And as you say, that looks good on paper, but I love the saying, what's the difference between theory and practice? In theory, there's no difference. But when you get the oh shit moment, this is not working, do I have to adjust it?
Well, there's the amount of times where you're in the office and we spend hours and hours trying to obviously design sessions and anything we're trying to work on with the players, and the many times you sit up on a board and you're like, he goes there and he goes there, and go and do it. And then if it works, then you can see, but you'll find every problem when you go on. And simple things like pressing the game, for instance, now is a big thing. It's even moments of, well, maybe that player at that particular time has just had 2 or 3 actions before it and is fatigued. So that loads and loads of different things come once you put it into practice. When you're sitting up on a board or on the internet, and don't get me wrong, the content is great and you can learn from it and it can develop ideas. Nothing substitutes actually going and practicing it.
Brilliant. And just to finish with that, and I know you've travelled a lot and you've gone to different countries, and that that shows your mindset about going out and almost stretching what I would say your map of the world to see different things. What was your learning from travelling and going to different countries and actually living in different countries?
So that this kind of ties up everything I've talking about in terms of my personality changing. So when I went over to Canada, the way of life was completely different. I was a guy that, don't get me wrong, I was a people person, always have been, but I was head down. I'm impatient. So when I travel, so if I'm going from A to B, it's how quickly can I get there, get out of my way, I'm on my way. In Canada, you'd be in the lift, waiting on a lift, and be, how are you getting on today? And how everyone was very, very sociable. And but it would irritate me because I'm like, why do I care what the random guy is? We're going in a lift together and we're having a chat. I was the small talk. I was a nightmare, and I was literally way out of my comfort zone. And then the way people spoke to each other in the dressing room was completely different. And I felt when I went over there, I was coming from Celtic, successful club. I'd won leagues and cups, and I was coming over to educate them. I know, subconsciously, I was thinking, of course, I didn't believe that, but I was coming there to tell them how great the way we do things were, and they were going to learn from me. And shortly after a while, I realised these people were brilliant, just phenomenal people. And the way they lived life was probably, you could argue, was much, much better way of life than the way we were, and arguing with everything, and just a calmer way of life. And so I kind of changed quite a lot with it. And my wife would tell you that more than anyone. I was like a changed man. I was much more patient, and I would small talk with people, and I was calmer, just calmer. That maybe the best way of putting it. And then I went to Ukraine, and Ukraine was the polar opposite, where everyone there was no real smiling faces in the morning. People were very much to themselves, very introverted, if you want, the kind of technical word. But slowly after a time, I went there, and I constantly had resistance, because I was thinking, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Arguing with everything that's going on. And it slowly dawned on me. It took time, but I realized, hold on a minute, I'm the foreign guy here. I'm the one that's different, not them. So I wasn't that I changed to suit them. I learned to adapt to them. And then India been the last one, where India was a place where you could not speak to someone the way you speak to someone here. It would just doesn't wash. Like you'd really hurt them. So how you brought a message across, and I mean within a game, and you know it's like in a game, tensions are through the roof. Here you can just shout, "Oh, you here." Where there you had to actually be calmer, and even just a message in pitch, let alone off the pitch. So those experiences, bear in mind, this is over kind of a 4-year period. Basically, I went from being the most fixed mindset of Celtic was the way to do everything. We were successful at Celtic. Celtic's a huge club, so surely we were doing it right. To, my God, there's millions of ways to do anything. There's millions of ways to treat people, and not only in one environment, you still have to treat people completely different, and you have to manage people completely different. So when I say like completely changed me, I mean definitely for the better. And then understanding, then when I started to kind of delve into coaching maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was looking at managers and coaches I liked, and Brendan Rodgers been one. I saw Brendan Rodgers how kind of calm and collected he is, and I thought, right, that's what I'll be. I'll be Brendan Rodgers. I realised, no. I realised quite quickly, I'm still Darren O'Dea. I've still got this fiery personality that can go any minute. So I learned how to actually to calm it down, and to filter things that came out. And now, like if you were to speak to people that didn't know me in my younger years, would think I'm very, very calm. Very rarely I'm angry, but I've got ways of coping with this, and I've listened through maturity and age, and that's probably helped as well. But going abroad was the biggest changing factor in my personality, and going into coaching, I don't think I'd have lasted 5 minutes in coaching without those experiences.
Amazing. And it's an amazing triad of countries, because you've got North America, Eastern Bloc, and then down to India, isn't it? So
I went from one day, so my apartment in Toronto overlooked Lake Ontario, there was like a beach, but we're in the middle of the city. So it's just a phenomenal way of life. And my wife's family had flown over. So there was 14 of us. We were having a barbecue out on this big balcony, looking over the water. And the contract came through from Ukraine. And within 24 hours, they were all there. And we booked to go I was off for a week. We booked to go to a cottage into the countryside down on a lake. And with all speedboats and all that. It was brilliant. Within 24 hours, I was in Ukraine. And wow, the change in environment was surreal. I was living in the training ground alone. No one wanted to speak to me. I'm getting FaceTimed, and they're down at this cottage, and it was a strange environment. And I struggled a lot in Ukraine. Don't get me wrong, I didn't enjoy the experience at the time. It was really, really tough. Bear in mind, the civil war kicked off in the middle of it all. So
what city were you in? Where were you in?
Donetsk.
Right. Oh, that's where
So it was really, really tough. And but I learned to adapt. And probably one of the proudest things, I look back now, is probably one of the proudest things. When I left Ukraine and I left India, I had the same message from the owners. One was from a director of football, one was the owner. And they said I was the first player that had ever brought the two different groups together. So in Ukraine, it was Russians, and then we'd loads of Brazilians, and then a kind of mixture of Dutch, Cypriot, Serbian. He said, you're the first player. He never said anything about on the pitch. He didn't say I was the best player, or he said, you're the first player we've ever seen bring the squad together. I thought, well, that's a nice thing. I kind of took it as just a passing remark. I thought, oh, thanks very much. See you later type thing. And then India, they said the same thing again. India, There was Nicholas Anelka was the manager, was French, brought in an influx of French players. We had a Spanish coach who brought in an influx of Spanish players, and then we had a mixture of obviously loads of Indian players, and then there was me and a Czech boy. And they said, you're the first player we've had that's brought everyone together. And I started to realise, this is maybe a strength of mine. And it was through my own experiences that I learned I never changed. I was always the kind of same mad hatter. I was always quite loud and loved the chat and loved the banter and all that. But I learned how to adapt to whatever environment I was in. I was good at it, adapting and making relationships. And now still to this day, like guys in Ukraine will message me, don't speak a word of English. I get emojis through, and India the same. The guys that I work with, I'm not talking about the players, I'm talking about staff and well, they send me a message, and I found that I'm actually quite good with people. And I thought, well, this will serve me well coaching, because my belief in coaching, which I've just discussed, was, okay, I want to be really detailed, I want to be immaculate, I want to be clear, but ultimately it'll come down to my relationships with them. And I think that's a real good strength I've got and I've developed. So fingers crossed that will help me then going forward.
Brilliant. And I think that's, it's just such a great quality to have, isn't it? And it's funny that to be able to bring people together or be the person that can relate to a lot of different people is such a strength, And I've seen what it's like in environments with a lot of different nationalities, because the motor racing I was involved in, there was about 5 or 6 different nationalities in one team. And it's interesting to look at the different traits and characteristics. But
I went at Celtic the year Tony Mowbray's in charge. I kind of played a lot more, and Tony brought in quite a few loan players and players from different countries. And I remember, and I cringe at it now, I remember being in like the masseur room and the physio room, and the French boys to be speaking French to each other. I think there was Dutch, they spoke Dutch, and I'd be going, speak English. And you can imagine when I went over to Ukraine, if someone was shouting at me, speak Russian, I'd been a mute. I had no Russian. So I was thinking, my God, I actually nearly wanted to ring them all up from that Celtic squad and go, listen, lads, I apologise. I didn't realise how hard this is, being the kind of outsider of the group. And of course, I spoke English the whole time I was in Russia. I had a translator. Don't get me wrong, I made an effort to learn the language. And that was something that I did. And again, going back to it with my own personality, was I would go out and eat dinner with the Russian guys. I couldn't speak a word of it. They really didn't really speak English, but just been around them and share a joke somehow. It was tough, don't get me wrong. And then once I learned bits of Russian and I could just about communicate, it became much easier. But I look back and think I was that fixed mindset of you fit into my environment, where I didn't realise how hard this is for these guys, and they're coming from a different background. And if I ask them to speak English, they don't speak English. They can't speak then. So that, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of giving myself a bit of praise in terms of being really accommodating. I was completely the opposite when I was at Celtic. But those experiences, as I said, just completely transformed my way of thinking.
Brilliant, Darren. I really appreciate that's been brilliant, and appreciate giving me the time this morning and to talk about yourself and your journey and your experiences. If people want to catch up with you on social media, where could they go? And
my Twitter is obviously the best place. So it's the only social media I've got. So Twitter. You'd be testing me if my handle.
No, that's okay. So I'm sure it'll be around your name.
Darren or something like that. But if obviously anyone ever wanted to, it's easy to contact you through that.
Great. So that's been brilliant, Darren. So thanks very much again, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.
I will. Thanks, Don.
Cheers.